Webcam microphone up close. Webcam microphone up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was a...
But I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, pistols, frontal slap of choice, I don't know that stuff. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they don't want you to have just read these two sources whenever I try to prove out one of these. It's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to sadly disappoint another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty old man, huh?
Really? You can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of...
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2. Within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America, we bring you the Ochelli Effect.
It's like, damn sure, no, I'm an original. We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years, for
that.
For a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
All right, good Thursday evening. UCY.TV radio. This is the Ochelli Effect. I am Chuck Ochelli. Well, just before I came to air, I was feeding my son, who was just born at the end of June. And, I had read an article earlier this week, actually. And I'm going to have on... By the way, thank you to everybody who is listening. Thank you to all the people that are listening on the alternative sort of streams, all the different ways that you get UCY.TV, especially from the homepage. Please go there and chat, join in, enjoy the shows. There are many, many hosts on this network to choose from. Okay. So, as I was saying, I fed my son just before I came to air. And, I was really kind of moved by an article I had read earlier this week, and it was about bottles and things. Now let's just see if I can add my guest, which is Suzanne Posel from Occupy Corporatism. Suzanne, are you with me?
I am. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for coming on. And, I had a little trouble adding you in there because everything seems to be a technical issue anymore. But I successfully got you on the air. So, here's the thing I was explaining, and I was hoping to actually have you hear part of that I was just feeding my son, who was born at the end of June, just before I came on the air, and I happened to read an article which you had put out all about the baby bottles and stuff. So, that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about tonight. So, you still with me?
I am here, yes, I am.
Okay, cool. I hear these weird noises occasionally because I don't know if my internet is exactly solid or what's going on here, but hopefully we're still broadcasting. And by all means, really, I'd like to get into the article. I mean, if you want to read it, if you want to just go through some bullet points on it, I think it's really important. There's a lot of things I could talk to you about, of course. Everybody knows Suzanne, not only from, her articles, which are at her website, but also you'll see that she posts on Facebook a lot. You'll see a lot of her stuff come up on the OchelliEffect.com, or, well, actually not on the .com page yet, excuse me, but the Facebook page. There's a reference to you on the .com page, but it hasn't been published yet.
Thank you.
No problem. I'll be more than happy to show it to you as soon as I can get it out there. But yeah, and of course everybody's heard you on Jack Blood's show, which is also simulcast on this network. So now we know who you are. Of course, if you want to, you've been on my show before, and if you want to add in any other things that are going on or any of the other work that you're doing, please go ahead.
I appreciate that. I am also not only the chief editor of OccupyCorporatism.com, but about somewhere in the 4, 5, 6 month range, I opened a media publishing house, and the USIndependent.com is the online newspaper, and it is phase 1, and we are very proud. We have 26 amazing contributors to the website, Juris Doctorate attorneys, experts, broadcasters, journalists, you name it. We have the news section, and we do have an opinion section. We also have a media miss section where if we find blunders that happen in the news, we like to put them there because, we need to chuckle every once in a while. But the point of the U.S. Independent is that, and as well the point of the Occupy Corporatism, is that I wanted to bring real journalism back. I see that tabloids have made their way from the newsstand and the checkout counter onto the internet, which was inevitable. But I think that we sometimes are a little bit confused because we have this idea that it's on the internet, it's official, it looks good, it must be real, it must be good. And because we can't discern, and it's understandable that the internet is a new tool that we're playing with. And I remember when there was no internet, and I'm sure you do too, Chuck. So this is like this new gadget that we all get to play with.
Right, and it's getting a whole lot more accessible, and of course there are all kinds of news feed services that contain a whole lot of this tabloid type stuff, and this is something that really does concern me as well, because there's a lot of really bad information that comes out, and you see it, across the flip boards and the whatever feeds at this point. I mean, it used to be there was only a couple of these sort of news feed services, but now they're everywhere. And a lot of it is either, cut, copy, and paste, or it's just junk, or it's links to websites that are arguing with each other when they're trying to make a singular point on the story or whatever else. And really, it just adds to the confusion at this point. So, yeah, and of course, Occupy Corporatism, just as a concept, by the way, I love the title, because it's just one of the things that definitely needs to be occupied. I mean, we had the Occupy Wall Street movement, we've had the Occupy this and the Occupy that, but realistically, the true enemy, as far as I'm concerned, is corporatism. And so, I just love the title for that reason alone. But yeah, the U.S. Independent, I totally didn't even mention that, because I'm just silly sometimes, and I'm pretty tired, so... But yeah, this is another really great website that you're involved with. Like you said, there's many contributors there and a lot of knowledgeable people. So definitely something that I would point people to as well. But back to the issue at hand. See, I'm looking at these baby bottles. I'm looking at baby formula. I'm looking at all kinds of stuff because sort of a later in life baby, because much younger than my other two children. We got blessed with a son at the end of June. Excuse me, January. God help me. At the end of June, and of course, I'm noticing the construction and the way that this stuff is made for kids at this point, and it's even worse than it was when my kids were born, the other two. And it's just really scary stuff. And that whole thing about the baby bottles, I'm really interested to hear what you have to say.
This shocked me. I first wrote about this chemical that we're going to be discussing is called Trident. It is manufactured by Eastman Chemical Company, which used to be Eastman Kodak. So if you hear me slip up and say Eastman Kodak, I'm talking about Eastman Chemical Company. Mm-hmm. So I originally wrote about them because I found that Camelback, which is not only contracted by the Department of Defense to produce a 3-liter hydration system that the soldiers wear on their backs and can be used even with a gas mask so they can still hydrate themselves. But this Camelback also is a marketed retailer. And so you can purchase their products in a lot of outlets that sell sporting goods and athletic equipment. And so Camelback in 2008 went completely BPA free. And they replaced BPA, bisphenol A, with a chemical from Eastman Chemical Company called Trident. Now, the reason why they had... Oh, go ahead.
Suzanne, I just want to interrupt you real quick because here's the thing. It makes a lot of sense that Eastman Kodak would manufacture lots of different chemicals because they were thoroughly involved with that when it came to the development of film, the processes of film. There was, for instance, when I took time to study the Zapruder film, I had to learn all about Kodachrome processing, which was a whole lot different than the way a lot of other films are made. So Eastman Kodak is definitely one of these companies that would have a long-term sort of experience when it comes to dealing with chemicals. That's one thing. We also have the Camelback situation in the BPA. Well, the deal there, of course, for those who don't know, and I'm sure there's very few people listening to us that don't know, but of course BPA is that wonderful chemical that's in so many different plastics, that's in a lot of canned foods and everything else, and this stuff has been proven to cause all sorts of dysfunction as far as biochemical reactions that affect sexuality, that affect neurology, that affect the organism's ability to grow and to prosper. And I mean everything from frogs to mice to people. It seems as though this stuff is dangerous to. So of course it would make sense that Camelback would turn around and try to get rid of that chemical finally after people noticed that maybe they had something hazardous, in their products, right? And,
absolutely.
But here's the kicker on it. Go right ahead.
Now, just to expand on what you said, BPA has been shown to cause breast cancer, all sorts of reproductive cancers, including prostate cancer, infertility, early puberty, which is called precocious puberty, and doctors are treating that with Depo-Provera in boys and girls. Neurological disorders, including depression and some psychotic disorders. Immune system compromises, which just means that you're going to get sicker, easier, longer, worse.
Right, and I mean this is not some sort of conspiracy theory. This is mainstream science that tells you this stuff,
Yes.
And it's still prolific in the bottling and canning industry anyway. I find that amazing every time I see it. I mean, almost like aspartame. But anyway, let's not get off on that little habit trail. But the point is that the point is that, we're looking at one dangerous chemical, and what did they replace it with, Suzanne?
They replaced it with Trident. Now, the adverse effects of Trident are severe dizziness, excitability, headaches, anxiety, vomiting, nervousness, sleep disorders, urinary dysfunction, heart palpitations, seizures, tremors, and macular disorders, which affect your eye. Now, when I was doing research originally on Trident with Camelback, I noticed that there were striking similarities to the clinical definitions of Gulf War syndrome and post-traumatic stress disorder that matched up with the adverse effects of the chemical. And so it makes sense to me because anxiety, headaches, hallucinations, heart palpitations, a lot of this may manifest itself as PTSD, but it might actually be that you don't need an antipsychotic for PTSD. It's that your body has been chemically poisoned by Trident over the period of time in which you were exposed to it, at whatever dose you were exposed to it, and duration.
So what's interesting here, of course, is that although we do discuss PTSD a lot, especially when discussing Gulf War veterans, I mean, this is the kind of thing that we've been discussing since Vietnam, really. But the thing is that the serious, huge increase, it seems, in PTSD, and then, psychotic breaks by soldiers and things like this, could very well be related not only to the literal fact that, look, if the human nervous system takes on too much of a burden, certain things begin to happen and coping mechanisms kick in, which causes the post-traumatic stress disorder person to end up with a lot of these problems, okay? But here's the fun part that we're talking about here. Of course, I say that with, tongue firmly planted in cheek, but here's the fun part, is that this could be chemically induced as well. So not only do we have the possibility that there are people that are suffering from PTSD who wouldn't be normally if they weren't exposed to these chemicals, but on top of it, we're also looking at the possibility that it's being exacerbated because maybe they were in a stressful situation. Maybe they had suffered what they used to call battle fatigue, and there was a couple other names for it, and they just slipped my mind at the moment. But the fact is that this is something that's been going on since World War I, as far as I know, as far as this diagnosis goes. But here's the thing. If it's being chemically induced, then it kind of starts to drift into the area of Gulf War syndrome, which is a whole other problem. And you know what? When you're talking about this nausea and this dizziness and the excitability, both of these things sort of make sense, right?
Absolutely. And just to give the audience an example, Staff Sergeant Robert Bales in 2013 was convicted of murdering 16 Afghani civilians, went on a complete rampage. I don't know if you remember the story, but he was over in Afghanistan, went on a rampage, just shot 16 Afghan civilians for no reason. Mm-hmm. Now, he was given, while he was, GI, he was given a drug called mefloquine. And mefloquine is used to treat malaria. It was a vaccine. Now, the problem with mefloquine is the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, advises people on the website that patients using mefloquine have a tendency toward becoming psychotic. And in the insert, according to the warnings made by the manufacturer of mefloquine, it states that mefloquine should not be used in people who have a family history of psychosis because it will cause psychiatric symptoms such as anxiety, paranoia, depression, hallucinations, and psychotic behavior. On occasions, it has been reported that patients became suicidal and homicidal.
And these kind of predispositions, a lot of doctors and a lot of, actually decent people, who are involved in nutrition, et cetera, will tell you that there's a lot of sort of triggers to avoid chemically and, even nutritionally to try and avoid these kinds of problems when you have a predisposition. This is precisely the reason why the family history, I know there's all sorts of different reasons for it now, but this is precisely why family history was introduced into the medical forms years ago. And, another thing, just really quick, too, for those who actually still watch TV, because I just recalled this in my own head, because I don't watch TV anymore, really. But the thing is that, I recall that there was one of those, the names have been changed, but we're doing a dramatization and all that kind of stuff. There was one of these stories that was on... let me think about it. Law and Order SVU, in fact, ended up doing an episode about this, where they changed the name of the chemical or they changed the name of the vaccination and et cetera. And, and there was all these different things that went on. And the funny thing is that it's actually pretty accurate as far as how things went down, how people ended up kind of cracking and everything else. So just something I wanted to point out real quick, that occasionally in the stream of garbage that's out there in the mainstream, they actually do manage to slip in a nugget or two of truth. But please go ahead, Suzanne. I'm sorry. I just wanted to kind of divert to that for just a second.
No, it's very important. See, the example of Sergeant Bales lets you know that the adverse effects to vaccines is not just autism and not just other neurological disorders. It's also homicide and suicide.
Right. That's not to discount autism and these other problems that come from the vaccinations, but yet there are many sorts of maladies that can occur even when adults are vaccinated. It's not just the children that are at risk. I mean, I've discussed on here about the flu shots for pregnant women. I mean, that's some really horrendous stuff, and so yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Now, getting back to Trident, I noticed that earlier this year, George Bittner, who is the founder of Certichem, put out a study. Now, this is a professor of neurobiology at the University of Texas in Austin. And his study showed that almost all plastics sold commercially leach out endocrine disruptors, which is what BPA, bisphenol A, is. That includes products claiming to be BPA-free, and using chemical substitutes such as Trident bisphenol 5, which is known as BPS, S as in Sam. Bisphenol 5 is an endocrine disruptor. And the reason why they know this, the reason why they know Triton is an endocrine disruptor and bisphenol 5 is because they are made with bisphenol A. Okay?
Big shocker there, right?
Exactly. So the chemical replacement has a constituency originating in bisphenol A. Triton has bisphenol A in it. It not only acts as an endocrine disruptor and has those adverse effects, such as reproductive cancers. You know, folks, the rise of male breast cancer in the last couple of decades is astronomical. So it's not just for women, folks. It's for men, too.
No, and in fact, the fatality rate for male breast cancer is actually higher than that in women.
It is, because men don't go and get the help that they need. They're embarrassed.
Well, not only that, but they're not as aware. I mean, men in general, if you asked, say 10 men on the street, I bet you that, if you simply ask them, are you susceptible to breast cancer, they would probably laugh at you. They don't think that it's a problem for them. Men,
you have breasts. They don't protrude like women's do, but you have breasts.
Well, most of yours don't out there.
Depending on how many times you visit McDonald's and eat expired food, or if you go to Taco Bell and eat horse meat. I don't know how often you do that.
Well, but sorry, it's just one of those.
Like to throw those out there, Yeah. There's a lot of reasons not to eat fast food, but the recent exposure of the expired and reconditioned food that has been sold to KFC, Pizza Hut, and McDonald's, that should be the nail in the coffin, folks, really. Expired, reconditioned food. I wrote this article 2 years ago about the FDA that allows corporations here in the United States to sell reconditioned food. They just repackage it, and they sell it to schools, our kids' lunches.
Reconditioned food.
Reconditioned food, which means it gets a new expiration date. Now, if you took chemistry, you understand that, bacteria doesn't adhere to expiration dates. Okay? So if there was an original expiration date and you took that food and you made something new out of it, it doesn't mean that the bacteria that may be forming says, oh, we have a new expiration date, we shouldn't go full throttle. We should just hang back for a minute. No. It'll go.
Well, not only that, but scientifically, look, when this stuff starts to go bad, it starts to decompose. Yes, I'm using the word decompose. And that creates all sorts of chemical byproducts, which they do get rid of the chemical byproducts when they repurpose, which is so disturbing to match that to the word food. But, when they do that, they get rid of a lot of the chemical byproducts, but you're absolutely correct. At the very core, you still have these bacteria, and these are all natural things which are meant to help it, as I said before, decompose, and it's amazing to me that this is allowed.
Well, let me explain listen up, folks, okay? The FDA says that it's okay if there are some insect parts discovered in your cocoa beans, live bugs left behind in dry fruit packages, mislabeled blueberry ice cream mixed with chocolate ice cream to avoid waste, 8 ounces of macaroni, there can be up to 225 insect fragments or 4.5 rodent hairs, okay? That's okay with the FDA.
See, I got to tell you, though, that the insects don't bother me so much as the chemicals and the fact that it can be repurposed. So, here's a fun thought, just, because it just occurs to me as I'm sitting here. You're not only repurposing the actual food, but you might be repurposing some of these acceptable levels of other things, and they get lost in the shuffle, too. That's okay, right?
Right, like in 3.5 ounces of canned mushrooms, you can have up to 20 maggots, but 21 maggots is not okay.
I really would love to know who drew that line. How 20 is okay, but 21 isn't. But I'm sorry.
There could be up to 15% mold composition in a can of cranberry sauce. But if there's anything above 15%, it's no good. Take it off the shelf.
Happy Thanksgiving.
I'm allergic to mold.
Ugh.
I'm allergic to penicillin and all of the derivatives of penicillin. I can't eat blue cheese. I can't eat feta cheese. I can't even eat something that might have been prepared with it. So this would kill me. 15% mold, I would be in the hospital.
Lovely. And I bet you're not the only one. And, again, it's okay if there's some mold, some bug parts.
Yeah, get used to it. It's okay. It's okay if they put a chemical in your baby bottles. And they use, by the way, Dr. Andrew Weil, if you don't know who he is, popular TV health guru, author of several New York Times bestsellers, really, really big. We've got a Dr. Oz situation going on. If you guys remember, or if you paid attention, Dr. Oz, when he was on Capitol Hill talking to the Congress, he said something, among other things, one of the things he said was just shocking to me. A lot of what he said shocked me. But one of the things he said is that he uses flowery language in order to convince his audience to purchase products. Now, he doesn't necessarily make money off of endorsing these products. But flowery language? Wait a minute, hold on a second. If anybody has taken business marketing and product placement, and if you haven't, it might be boring, but maybe watch some stuff on YouTube about it. Seriously. Because the reason why Dr. Oz is selling these products, and before I go into that, let me tell you about the Oz effect. He was talking about a product. This company, I forgot what they sell, but they are out of South Florida. And just by mentioning their product, within 24 hours, they sold 500,000 bottles. It was a supplement company. 500,000 bottles in less than 24 hours simply because Dr. Oz mentioned their name on his show. So Dr. Andrew Weil putting his name behind these, or in front of, rather, this Weil Baby product line is not just arbitrary. They choose people they think have a sphere of influence, and they believe that the audience will do what they are told by their guru or their the person they have branded loyalty toward, including purchasing products without questioning the product or the manufacturing. Now,
psychologically speaking, what it is like a combination between the appeal to authority and the and popularity also. Like, in other words, it must be okay because after all, this guy who's a doctor, happens to endorse it, number one. Number two, it's also, the general sort of celebrity endorsement kind of thing where it's like you want to be like them or whatever else. So you have both things going on there. Because these guys who have these, the word doctor in front of their names gives them a whole other level. It's not like, you're just getting Kim Kardashian skin cream because she likes it so much. No, but if it was, God help us all, but if it was Dr. Kim Kardashian, then not only would it give it, that celebrity endorsement, but it would also give it the sort of stamp of approval. It must be good for me because, after all, a doctor endorses it. After all, a doctor stands by it, right?
Absolutely. That is exactly what it is. I had a discussion earlier today with someone about Judge Napolitano. And they said, oh, well, he got fired. I said, he did not get fired. Look, the MSM sell you news just like any other corporation sells you products. And so in the case of Judge Napolitano, his product became discontinued. But they found value in the spokesperson, which is Judge Napolitano. He brings money into the corporation. So what they did is they gave him a new product to sell. Now he is the senior judiciary analyst. So now every time he goes on the network, their ratings spike. He doesn't have to worry about having a show every week, and the corporation still enjoys all the spikes in the ratings just by having him on periodically or, sporadically if need be. This is no different than what we're talking about here.
Well, right, except in this case you have a judge, so therefore this has, some sort of legality to it. This has another form of an appeal to authority because, after all, a judge is a great analyst because they're the people that we entrust to make judgments. regarding various things. And of course, this is exactly what people would flock to. And I bet you it actually has increased what he gets paid for what he does. This is my opinion, of course, but I bet you anything that it has actually helped him, if anything.
I thought it was just interesting when his show got canceled, and then I saw him on Fox News. And I saw him again on Fox News, and then I kept seeing him on Fox News. And he was always in this analyst stance where he was explaining something about the law. So he didn't lose. All he lost was his show. Okay, so he doesn't have to do his show. So that's actually less of a burden on him. He can just show up whenever they call and spout out a bunch of stuff and leave instead of having to prepare for a show and get a guest and do all of that stuff. With Andrew Weil, this gentleman has been speaking out against BPA for a long time, and this baby line product has been out for 4 years using Trident. So the manufacturer, which is Key Baby LLC, claims that these bottles are dishwasher safe and they make a great choice for infant care products. However, on the spec sheet, according to Eastman Chemical Company, the manufacturer of Trident, they say that copolyesters, which is what Trident is, should be used in limited applications when exposed to high levels of heat, such as in the dishwasher. They specifically said in the dishwasher. They don't want you to put this in the dishwasher. Let me tell you what happens when you put it in the dishwasher. Or if you have a Camelback product that you put in the dishwasher. Or if you have any other product, Rubbermaid, by the way, has a product for commercial kitchens. Their Rubbermaid commercial products are all exclusively Trident. And these are serving trays and containers used in commercial restaurant kitchens. So guess what, folks? You might be exposed to it just by going to your favorite restaurant and not even know it.
Hey,
so when you put it in the dishwasher heats up. It heats up past the threshold, which is 176 to 194 degrees Fahrenheit. Most dishwashers run on 200 degrees Fahrenheit at the minimum. And the Trident leaches out of the container itself and becomes immersed in the water. So all of your other dishes and utensils are now being covered in Trident. And you can't see it. It's not like you can scratch it off. So you're eating it, even if you're not using the bottle. You're eating it when you put your fork in your mouth. You're eating it when you use your plates, when you're cooking with your saucers and your pans.
And here's another fun part. I mean, I used to, now before I understood what was going on, I would always stick a baby bottle in the microwave, to be honest with you, just to warm it up.
Oh, geez. Well,
that's the kind of thing that I used to do.
Well, you know what? I'm a kid of the 80s, and I can't tell you how many lean cuisines or kid cuisines I ate when I was a kid. Well, and those are direct microwave, But what a microwave does is it cooks from the inside out. That's why all restaurants have been mandated to stick food in the microwave for 20 seconds before they actually serve it to you. And so they have to have microwave-safe containers in which to do so, which may be plastic, which might be BPA-free, laced with Trident or bisphenol 5.
Which is made with BPA anyway.
Yes, so you're not saving yourself from anything. And the problem is that one of the running jokes in independent and alternative media is that, well, they're going to replace it with something worse. Well, they did. They replaced it with something worse. Very few people have talked about this enough. That Trident, the replacement for BPA, is worse because it not only, like I said, has the effects of an endocrine disruptor, which is BPA, but it also has its own list of adverse effects, which are terrifying to me. If I had all of a sudden tremors and seizures and heart palpitations, vomiting, headaches, anxiety, urinary dysfunction, I would really start to freak out. But would I be cognizant enough to be aware that it might possibly be the chemical in the packaging of the product or the container of the product that I'm eating?
Well, see, but that's why I said to you before about the post-traumatic stress disorder thing, is that this could be a misdiagnosis now, because, you don't know what they would diagnose that as. If you suddenly come up with tremors and seizures and things like this, what are they going to do? They're going to run you through an MRI, they're going to test your blood, they're going to test various different bodily fluids, they're going to see environmentally. Probably one of the last things they're going to look at is what you're eating your food out of. It'll be probably attributed to something else. And I think that this is another problem because, like you said, with the whole PTSD thing. I mean, how often do you think that maybe, just maybe, somebody who has been diagnosed with PTSD may have just simply been poisoned? And how easily could anybody else be poisoned? I mean, look, I don't have a microwave in my home now, but the thing is, I bet you a lot of people do that are out there listening. And, when you use these types of containers in the microwave, you're begging for them to leach into whatever it is you're eating, drinking, whatever, and this is just your self-poisoning is all you're doing, voluntarily.
Well, and also involuntarily, because we have something called parabens, and I don't know how familiar you are or your audience is, but parabens, when they do biopsies of breast tumors in men and women, they find 99% paraben in the tumor. Okay? So, what are parabens? Parabens are a disruptor in our body. It's a chemical that they add to food, to healthcare products, to packaging. There are lots of different parabens. If you see anything, whatever you can't pronounce, and it ends with bens, stay away from it. All of those scrubbing beads in your facial, your body wash, your facial scrubs, that's all parabens. It's in Johnson & Johnson baby shampoo. It's in the Desitin baby cream. It was in the silver nitrate that my pediatrician gave to my son on a prescription.
Wow.
When we went through our toiletries, when we found out about parabens, we threw away 99% of our toiletries. I had to go out the next day and go shopping. And what I found was, even when I went to Whole Foods Market or Trader Joe's or places where you would find healthy products amongst healthy food, when I turned the packaging around, it had parabens in it. Now, there was a study done in New York last year with the New York State Department of Health and the Department of Environmental Health and Services in conjunction with the University of New York in Albany. And what they found was they just randomly went to various grocery stores and randomly picked out products, juices, soft drinks, food, chicken, vegetables, fruits, breads, baked goods, also shampoos and conditioners and health products. And what they found were high levels of parabens in everything. And one of the things that confounded them was they expected it to be in the deodorant and the shampoo and the conditioner, the cosmetics, the baby formula, by the way, along with aspartame and fluoride. But they were surprised that it was on the fruits and vegetables. How did it get on there? They weren't clear on whether or not it was sprayed on or how did it come in contact with the parabens, and in a way that it actually contaminated the fruit and vegetable itself. Not just on top, not just something you could scrape off. If you peel the apple, it's still contaminated. So,
wow.
Nobody talks about parabens. And yet, we all talk about the BRCA1, BRCA2 gene. We all talk about double mastectomies and breast cancer. We don't talk about the fact that the National Cancer Institute on their own website states that even if you have the BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutation, it is in no way an indicator that you will come down with breast cancer. But your duration and exposure to parabens will directly cause some sort of reproductive cancer, including breast cancer, because of what they find when they biopsy the tumors. And they go and inspect them and they find that it's 99% paraben. So obviously the parabens are causing these tumors.
Well, you are what you eat and so are the tumors, right?
Absolutely.
And again, it's still rather frightening. And BPA alone, forget, aside from and I've never really, I've glossed over the term parabens, to be honest with you. It's one of those things that I wasn't focused on, but I'm glad you brought it up, because I guarantee you that's got to be yet another one of these very dangerous factors that's in the food supply and everything, apparently. Like you said, it seemed to be sort of, logical for it to be in the deodorants and all that kind of stuff, but it makes no sense that it ends up in the vegetables and everything else unless, it's being leaked in there just like, being leached into it just like everything else is with all these other sort of chemicals as they degrade and as the packaging works. I mean, my God.
I know, it is incredible. And just so everyone understands, Trident is actually 23 separate compounds. When I say Trident, I'm actually talking about 23 separate things that could be considered a Trident chemical. And when Eastman Chemical Company, I told you I'd mess that up.
There it goes.
When they publish their material safety data sheets, which, by the way, is all linked, all of this stuff is linked up in my articles, the actual documents, you can click on them when you go to occupycorporatism.com. The 23 separate chemical compounds sold under the name Trident are individually specified on the material data safety sheet. However, there is no data on toxicity and no explanation about environmental effects of any of the 23 compounds that are known under the Trident umbrella. So they don't give you information about toxicity or toxicity levels. They only talk about how wonderful it is and how many companies are using it. And by the way, a lot of companies have jumped on the bandwagon because when BPA came out and everybody found out about that, sales went down. Everybody who sold anything in plastic went right down the toilet. So they had to come up with something. Now, this replacement is, in my opinion, worse because it's not only a BPA endocrine disruptor, but it also has its own array of terrible, nasty side effects. And we are infecting, or rather poisoning, our U.S. veterans, our current active duty, and everyone who wants to be healthy, because it's sold in sporting goods stores. It's sold to athletes. It's sold to people who'd like to just carry around a bottle of water, a special little bottle of water. You might be using a BPA-free product that is used with Trident, or has Trident in it. And then, unfortunately, I was doing an interview earlier on television and talking about this, and the host said, well, what do we do? And unfortunately, I don't know what we can do. I know that as much glass, lead-free, by the way, lead-free glass, as possible. But I understand I have 2 small children. I wouldn't feel comfortable giving an infant a glass baby bottle. But we obviously have a problem with the way that we're creating plastic. Not only is it oil, it's petroleum, and you're ingesting petroleum. But they use all of these chemicals in order to create the product. See, BPA itself is a binder. So when they make the plastic, the BPA acts as glue to keep all of the constituents together. So when they took the BPA out, they had to replace it with something that would do the same thing that BPA did without the side effects. Unfortunately, they weren't really concerned about the side effects. Or maybe they just said, hey, if we just market this enough and put it in every product and say that it's safe, then nobody's going to say anything because we already went through the BPA scare. We did the Hegelian dialectic. They've all fallen for it. And so now we can continue on. Yes, we have this new chemical, and yes, people are going to have to, buy products with it made, and that might cost some companies some money to convert. But in the end, it's all worth it because we get to do what we want to do. And everybody thinks that everything's okay.
See, and this really smacks to me of exactly the same type of strategy that was used by the larger corporations regarding aspartame, because now that stuff is being repackaged under new names and everything else, and it's essentially the same garbage. And it's, again, all over the place. It's all throughout the food. I mean, they did
the same thing with Prozac.
Right.
Prozac is absolutely horrible. In fact, I think it was 2/3 or higher of the participants during the study, during the trials, dropped out within 2 weeks because they could not handle the adverse effects. So when Prozac, when their license went out and it became, generic, was opened up and people could buy it for less, they took it back, rebranded it, and said, "Oh, you have PMS? Here, take this pill," and it's got like a daisy, and it's like a flowery pink kind of name. It's for PMS. It's Prozac.
No, right. It exactly. I mean, and that's another frightening thing is that, and even on the inserts for that stuff, it tells you that it can cause suicide. I mean, if you watch any of those commercials, you ever notice that every single one of these psychoactive drugs always has the so-called side effect of may actually cause suicide? Now, I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit off here, and maybe it's just me, and I was struck in the head too much as a child, I don't know. But, if you're taking something that's supposed to help with your depression, I would rather it not be something that is going to possibly induce suicide, which is often the result of a deep depression. I don't know, maybe it's just my screwed up logic here, I don't know.
Well, when I look at all of these shootings, and children and adults, if I look hard enough, and sometimes I don't have to look that hard, but if I do, I always find an antipsychotic or an antidepressant or a mood stabilizer.
Mood stabilizer, yeah, that's always a good term right there.
The Ritalin and kids are normal. Kids are inquisitive and they question authority. They do so because they want to make sure that they get it right. They're born into this world. They don't understand our rules and regulations. They're just going along as they go along. They hope they get it right. And the one person that they trust the most to test out whether or not they've got the information correct is their parents. And that's what the authority struggle is between parents and children. It's absolutely normal. It means that when they grow up, they're not going to just hopefully, blindly follow something because everybody said so. So what do? We drug it out of them. We stick a tablet or a game controller device in their face and say, "Here, do this." It's very important.
That is definitely the feeder bar for the rats in the maze right there. That's all I see these tablets and smartphones as at this point. It's definitely just something to keep the lab rats occupied. But
it really is.
And another frightening kind of sort of, and I know we veered off the subject here a bit, but I don't care because it's all relevant as far as I'm concerned. The fact is that not only are they using stuff that is supposed to suppress their personalities, suppress their natures, but in a lot of cases I see this stuff as like derivatives of methamphetamine, or not methamphetamine, but of amphetamines, excuse me, because a lot of it is a derivative of that. And this is supposed to do what? It's supposed to focus them? Wow.
Yeah, you give your kid Ritalin, you're giving them speed. And so you're giving them Ritalin because they are not behaving correctly. They're bouncing off the walls. So you give them speed. What do you think is going to happen? If they're already bouncing, they're going to be really bouncing off of the walls. Then you give them, then you have to go back to the psychiatrist and say, my son's taking or my daughter's taking the Ritalin and nothing's happening. So they give you another drug. And then before you know it, your kid's taking 4 or 5 antipsychotics and mood stabilizers and psychotropic drugs, and all of a sudden they go into their room and it's dark and they don't want to speak to anyone. And they do all of these morbid things and like morbid things and become interested. And you never wonder why. You start blaming it on television and you start blaming it on their friends. It never occurs to you that the drug that you're giving your child is actually inhibiting the receptors in their brain. And the dopamine and serotonin receptors that these drugs target are not behaving correctly. And so they are becoming depressed. And it's unchecked. And it goes forever because children are not developed yet. They're neurological makeup is still developing, and they don't understand, and then all of a sudden they've got this thing inhibiting their ability to feel and their ability to enjoy and their ability to love. And all that they can think about and all they're consumed with is anger and hate. And so we are very, very shocked when all of a sudden they grab a gun or anything else and become violent or suicidal.
Well, right, and you know, this was always the thing that amazed me too, is that generally what has also been extremely hazardous is, again, we kind of sort of threw it aside with the tablets and the and the smartphones and all that, but the reality is this: if you're not interacting with other human beings, okay, human beings are social creatures. They're supposed to interact with one another. This is one of our basic natures. You know, I brought it up many times on the air where there were, plenty of cases where babies that weren't held died because they didn't have the interaction. They didn't have a relationship to their environment, and they didn't have a living person interacting with them. Okay, and the same thing happens for elderly people, which Maria Heller corrected me on by making sure I understood that also with elderly people, when they're isolated, when they're not being social creatures like is our nature to be, it does cause earlier death. It does cause greater health problems. This is something that has baffled me to no end, that there's this massive disconnect that is acceptable in society at this point, that it's okay to be staring down at your phone. It's okay to not talk to anybody. It's okay to only interact electronically. It's okay to live your entire life out on the internet, or even have a second or third life out on the internet. But actually socializing face-to-face, actual human interaction, the way that it always has been throughout our entire history, is negated in a lot of cases by this stuff. So actually, although these are great tools and we can use them to communicate and we can use them to exchange ideas and everything else, they can also be used to isolate the individual person. And a developing human being, an adolescent human being especially, because their hormonal levels are changing, their world is changing in front of them, their level of awareness, their neurology is still developing, their bodies are developing. It's a very confusing time, but the deal is that if they don't have just normal, natural interaction with other human beings, this is yet another dangerous factor. So if you take that, feed them a bunch of speed, give them a bunch of chemicals, I mean, the idea that kids are going to go off every once in a while is like a guarantee now. Not even just like the occasional aberration. It's like a guarantee that you're going to have dysfunctional adults because they didn't they didn't come up with that ability to interact, with that ability to socialize. It's being completely inhibited by the substitution of this secondary world. And, so that is a huge factor. But if you just even take that out of the equation, the chemical factor is dangerous enough, at least in my opinion.
Well, yeah, there's a new movie. My husband was over at a friend's house, and they have a young boy. He's about 11 years old. And it's called Ender's Game. Okay. And so he's watching this film with the family, and within the first 10 minutes, there's a violent murder scene. All the adults looked around at each other, but nobody turned off the film while the 11-year-old keeps watching this film. And the reason why this is so pertinent and so shocking is because this is a pivotal scene in the movie. The main character kills someone, one of his competitors. And when questioned why, he says, well, I knew that if I beat him up, it would just solve the problem now. I wanted it to be solved forever. And this whole film is all about this new Luke Skywalker kind of hero where he stands in front of a computer screen and plays a video game and sends drones out to kill actual aliens. But the idea is you're killing living creatures with drones, and you're never actually in battle anymore. You're standing behind a computer screen. And the psychological makeup of this boy, where at such a young age he reasoned in his mind that killing this other kid would then solve his problem forever. This character trait helps propel him to eventually saving the world from aliens. So this is a glorification of psychotic and sociopathic behavior.
That was exactly the word I was going to use if you didn't use it, is that it is the glorification of sociopathic behavior. It is as though sociopathic behavior is being encouraged in a lot of cases here. And it is primarily through that disconnect. There is no, consequence. There is no real bloodshed in a lot of cases. There is a lot of fabricated stuff. And what it does cause, and I hate to say this, but what it does cause is a greater tolerance for it, too. It becomes, part of the normal, part of the, not only the normal, but as it's being glorified, I mean, let's not gloss over that. As it's being glorified, it actually elevates the acts of, of a sociopath to a hero status, not, in other words, turning it all completely on its head from what it should be. And this type of stuff is being encouraged in a lot of places, and it's not just Hollywood. I mean, the television industry and even in the news media in a lot of cases. The truth is that in the mainstream, what gets glorified the most? Well, if it bleeds, it leads. That's just all there is to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's the idea. If anyone ever read Joseph Campbell, I loved his work as a kid. A Hero with 1,000 Faces is one of the books that he wrote and that he's famous for. The Power of Myth is another one. And he talks about the idea that the anti-hero. And there are a lot of books that we read in high school and in junior high that had the anti-hero motif. Batman is an example of the anti-hero. He does bad things. He does illegal things. But he has a grander, greater good purpose for doing it. And so we say, okay, Batman, you can go ahead and do that, even though you shouldn't be doing that because you're just some wealthy guy who wants to put on a suit and go become a vigilante. But that's okay. We'll forgive you because you're doing it because your parents were killed and you're fighting crime and you're using it for good instead of evil. But the anti-hero now has morphed into it's okay to murder, it's okay to kill as long as you have a justified reason. And it doesn't necessarily mean for the greater good. It might mean to elevate you, like in this movie Enter Game. It elevates him to this status where he's put into the special school and he's deemed the one. It's got the Neo Matrix kind of theme going on, and then all of a sudden he saves the world. Little kids look at this. They don't see anything bad about this. And one of the things that really, really disturbed me, if we're going to talk about marketing and product placement, two main characters, the two adult main characters who make the decisions that propel this little boy from a murderer to a hero is Harrison Ford, who was Han Solo and Indiana Jones when I was growing up, and Ben Kingsley, who was Gandhi when I was growing up. So these two people, anyone in the Generation X or the baby boomers, we would all remember Han Solo and Gandhi. So we would remember Ben Kingsley. It's a way to get the parents as well on board with the programming of the film, to put characters in that eventually end up being bad people. But we accept the anti-hero because, hey, it's Indiana Jones. It's Gandhi. What bad could they do?
Well, yeah, that plus, this is why a lot of these older sort of actors are now being reintroduced into films because, after all, they're not garnering the type of box office they used to. So what they do is they try and drag us in there across generations a bit. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to admit this, but even I wanted to see, how the hell Sly Stallone was going to pull off a new Rambo movie, okay? I mean, it was just one of those things. And this is part of the hook as well, yeah.
This is how they do it. I realized, I'm going to be 37 in 2 weeks. And I'm starting to freak out because I'm getting really close to 40. And I've realized that I am now officially a demographic. When we do watch mainstream films, I notice that even especially in the kids' films, they're not just entertaining my child, they're entertaining me. In a lot of these, sometimes my husband and I will just watch a mainstream film. We just want to just forget everything just for a minute. We're human too.
And you know what? Those sub-references do pop up in the children's films. Like stuff that the kids would have no clue what it is, but they'll totally go back to something. Like they'll have like even a fictitious sort of monster character playing with a toy that none of our kids could possibly identify. And I'm a little bit older than you, by the way, but I'm already past that 40 mark.
Oh, jeez.
This is why I say, later in life, baby is my son. But the thing is that they turn around and they'll give, like, say, a monster character, a furry, fuzzy monster character, even not even a scary one. They'll give him a toy that only, say, you or I would recognize, or even the example of Toy Story, let's just say.
Yes.
Okay, that's a perfect example. They're still marketing that. Okay, and they have done that across the generations, but the reason why they had to insert Mr. Potato Head, and the reason why they had to insert, the doggy with the spring, and, stuff like that, and even the army men and all this other stuff, these toys may still exist, but they were really prominent during, like, say, our childhood years. And this is the kind of stuff where we look at it and kind of smirk at it and say, oh, I remember that. That's just like they do on Facebook all the time. Like this, if you remember that, telephones had dials on them. You know what I mean? Like stupid stuff like that. So when we see it, we kind of like harken back to our childhood. So they kind of pull us in too for the rest of that product placement that they're going to do throughout the rest of the film. The Taco Bells and the Pepsi machines and everything else that they're going to stick in there when, Buzz Lightyear's running through a pizza parlor or whatever, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And so you say, oh, well, I understand it. You become nostalgic, so you allow it's okay. It's a safe movie because, I remember that. How bad could it be?
Right.
But we in our house, we don't, the children don't know what's popular now as far as cartoons go. They watch the cartoons that I grew up watching. But even then, when they watch He-Man or She-Ra or the Smurfs or the Snorkels or any of this stuff, I see it now.
See, and you're chuckling while you're saying it, Suzanne. I just want you to notice that.
I know, because the Snorkels is so random. Anybody who really remembered the 80s would say, I remember that.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? And I could tell just from that raising up in the corners of your mouth while you were saying it, I bet you really love the Smurfs, too.
And I like the Snorkels.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to point that out because I could hear you start to giggle before you giggled when you were mentioning these names. And I just said to myself, see, she saved the two ones that she really liked for last, the Smurfs and the Snorkels. So,
but it's even in the Looney Tunes. My son really likes the Flintstones. He thinks Barney and Fred are the funniest thing on the planet. But as I'm watching this, and the relationship between Fred and Wilma and Barney and Betty, and what? I didn't see any of that growing up at all. In the Looney Tunes cartoons with Foghorn Leghorn, I didn't see any of this at all when I was a kid. It's amazing that it takes 20, 25 years of experience and maybe having kids and doing, the quote-unquote adult thing responsible thing that you should be doing, that you realize, oh, whoa, wait a minute, they programmed me to do all of this. And I'm doing it.
I'll give you a quick funny reference too, and anybody that says the Flintstones are an innocuous sort of cartoon, I just want you guys to think about this for a minute. Before yours and my generation, just before yours and my generation, the Flintstones actually would step off of their little TV set, okay, and do Winston commercials for cigarettes, okay? I don't know if people are aware of that, but they really don't like it when that film surfaces, but I'm telling you, you can find it. I guarantee you can find Fred and Barney smoking Winstons. And I think there was a Salem commercial as well, because they were made by the same company, R.J. Reynolds. But, Fred sitting there, the cartoon guy who, everybody says it's a, big old Honeymooners ripoff, and it kind of is. I get it, but you know what? Think about this when you think about how innocuous and, non-dangerous that cartoon was. They were selling you cigarettes, people.
And this show was always marketed to children, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Even though it was a prime time, before The Simpsons became The Simpsons, okay?
Right.
This was the biggest primetime cartoon series ever was the Flintstones, actually. The Simpsons have eclipsed it, and, we could get into that sometime if you want, but the fact is that, this is not an innocuous cartoon. There's a whole lot of bizarre sort of little social issues going on there. The husband's always got to lie to the wives. The wives are very one-dimensional characters who just want to go charging things and spending money and, and all this other sort of really kind of misogynistic behavior goes on there. And then after a little while, he even gets the little, the sort of devil sitting on his shoulder, which ends up being an alien, which is a whole other weird thing. But, I mean, there's all sorts of strange subtext in the Flintstones alone.
Yeah, and look at the way that our social consciousness was at that time.
Right.
It mirrored it perfectly.
Yeah, it sure did, because, listen, you keep the... And also notice, I mean... Yes, a lot of people were barefoot and all that kind of stuff, but you notice, Wilma and Betty, they each had one dress. Even though the guys had a couple different costumes and they went to their elk lodge or whatever it was.
That's right, their Masonic elk lodge, right?
They had the Masonic group there and all that, even though they're just a bunch of silly guys who drink beer. They were constantly drinking beer, whether you wanted to admit it or not. That's what they were doing. Bowling and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, after he was out with his buddies drinking all night, he would have all these crazy ideas. And, so actually you had a much more misogynistic, sort of neo-addictive behavior being pushed by the Flintstones than you did even by the Honeymooners. The Honeymooners was actually a whole lot more of a wholesome show than the Flintstones was.
Yeah, the Ralph Cramden just threatened to beat his wife every day.
Yeah,
that's all. Just nothing bad.
He just tried to punch her in the mouth, but at least he wasn't drinking. And
that's true.
But you know what? He had a Masonic lodge too, but that was the raccoons, and that was much more silly. So.
Yeah, because Masonic lodges are fine. What's funny is when we were moving out to Washington State, we were looking at different houses to rent, and there was this really beautiful 1920s refurbished. It was gorgeous. I really wanted to rent this place. It was just awesome. It really creeped me out when I went in there. I was like freaking myself out that there were ghosts in there. It was awesome. I loved it. But there was a stone plate, a stone square in the front of it, and it had a triangle with an eye and some weird symbol in the middle. And I actually snapped a picture of it on my cell phone. And that's the reason why we didn't rent that house. Even though I loved this house, I could not live in front of this Masonic symbol for however long we were going to rent this house. I just couldn't do it. It was creepy to me that this stuff is just sitting there. This is a well-bred neighborhood, this nice established neighborhood with lots of old refurbished houses.
Usually is.
And there it is, just sitting there like right off the sidewalk and leading up to this house.
Yeah, that's frightening enough. And I know people bust my chops a little bit because I do this thing where I put my eyeball up to cameras a lot now because I'm kind of staring back at them. That's the way I look at it. Okay, so that's the explanation for why you see the eye all over the place on my stuff. It's my eyeball, okay? That's my eyeball. It's like I'm looking back at you. That's the way I deal with it. But,
everybody's going to come up with their own conspiracy theory on that. You can't get out of that.
I've already gotten it, believe me. There's a piece of hate mail I keep threatening to read, and I'm going to do it one of these days. But I don't know if I can do it with a straight face because the stuff I'm being accused of is hysterical.
Can you read it now?
You know what? I can try and pull it up.
I'll help you read it.
Let me give you a brief synopsis of this, okay? First of all, when he first wrote to me, it was like so incomprehensible. I actually complained on the air, and I challenged him to write me something that was coherent. So he did. He wrote me a paragraph where at the beginning of the paragraph, he essentially accuses me of, how did he put it? Prevaricating, okay? Prevaricating. Think about that word for a minute. For the Jewish conspiracy. Then, toward the end of the letter, he essentially decides that I am also a Satanist, and therefore am completely evil and am part of this big master plan, and my big response to him was one sentence. I said, if I'm part of some big master plan, I'd really like to know where my checks are going because I'm not getting them. If I'm part of the master plan, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. Then you have nothing to worry about. Because anybody who would try and take me on the New World Order's plans here would be laughed out of, I don't know, Bilderberg or wherever they would bring it up. There is no reason in the world to suggest that I have anything to do with that nonsense. So, and that, of course, caused me to take more pictures of the eyeball and put them up on Facebook and stuff. So.
Prevaricate means to avoid telling the truth by not directly answering a question.
Right. And this is exactly what this person said that I do all the time when people ask me questions. But the truth is that most of the time on my broadcast, I'm the one asking the question or making just a quick comment. I usually let my guests just speak. I don't really get asked a lot of questions. So I don't know what he's talking about. Anyway. I'm sorry, we've totally gone off the rails here, but I'm telling you this article, all about the way these baby bottles are made and everything else. It is not just about the baby bottles. I know, I'm more focused on it now because, yet again, I'm blessed with another child and all that, and I'm looking at all this stuff, and I'm telling you, man, it's like everywhere I turn, just like for the rest of us, everywhere we turn, there seems to be a poison, a hazard, another chemical that's going to debilitate us in one way or another. I mean, and the amazing thing here is that I did not realize that this stuff, also contains basically BPA anyway. So it's like, well, we'll not just give you back the BPA that we told you we took out, but we're going to give you more.
Exactly.
So, hey, look, you didn't like 5 poisons? Well, how do you like 15?
Yeah, don't complain now. Well, this kind of reminds me, and this is kind of off topic, but I wrote this article this week as well, because I noticed that the Satanic Temple is claiming that because of the Supreme Court ruling that Hobby Lobby, that corporations now have freedom of religion, the Satanic Temple wants to use that new ruling to say that they should not be mandated by the state that requires women considering abortions to read pro-life material. And so they're using this, corporations have the right to religious affiliation and freedom of religion to say, well, we're satanic and this is our religion. Our religion is based on science, according to their website. And they said, quote, in the coming months, we will be initiating a number of other campaigns to assert our religious protection for women with health needs that are being complicated by unreasonable laws. Oh, here we go. Folks, listen. So corporations are people. They have freedom of speech. Ugh. Now they have freedom of religion. Now, I was talking with my husband a couple of nights before we wrote this article. We actually came up with this together because we were joking around before I even saw this Satanic Temple article that this is going to open the floodgates. So corporations have freedom of speech, freedom of religion. That means they can have a religious affiliation. You are actually talking about the Church of Satan, which is out on the West Coast, right? Yeah.
And you know what's funny is I had recently brought this up on a broadcast, and I'm actually in the midst of trying to bring on people from there to discuss exactly what you're talking about here. And yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. Don't send them my. Well, I was going to say send them my article, but no, it's actually against what they're trying to do.
No, it's okay. I want them to explain. Is what I want is to explain themselves in general. I'll give them a chance to to put out what it is that they that they believe their existence is. Look, I believe in the freedom of expression for anybody, so long as they don't harm others. So my whole point is, okay, so tell us really what you're about, and I want to hear about this. So please continue with your article, because I'm just I'm just tickled that you went to this.
It's actually becoming a viral article on several aggregator websites right now, and I'm very, very glad because I think that this needs to be injected into the public debate. So, freedom of religion, what does that actually mean?
Mm-hmm.
It means that a corporation can say, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Satanist, I'm a pedophile. There are pedophilic religions out there. I'm not joking with you.
No, there absolutely are. There absolutely are, and if you can imagine it, there is a religious order for it. Let's just put it that way.
Well, absolutely. And see, in my article, I cited an example. In Australia, there was a rabbi who failed to stop an alleged pedophile who was sexually abusing boys at a Sydney Jewish school because it inferred that this rabbi rather inferred that the children themselves had consented to the sexual relations and that the victim was actually the pedophile. And this would now become a legal argument in court if the corporation decided to adhere to a religion that glorifies or at least allows pedophilia.
Wait. Let me get this straight.
Oh, yeah.
What you're saying is that they asserted, and I don't even care who it was, what they're asserting is that it's possible that, the child is asking for it, so therefore, has possibly seduced the poor pedophile. This is what we're looking at here, I mean, realistically?
Yes, this is what this rabbi in Australia said. And so he went on to claim that the police investigations into the allegations were not pertinent, and they were simply, quote, opening a can of worms.
Well, you know what? He got that right. I'll give him that because, never mind. Go ahead. Please go on.
Let's say that you work for a corporation, and that corporation decides that the corporation's corporate culture is going to reflect their religious beliefs. And let's say that it is, let's say that it's satanic. Okay, let's go for the most shocking.
Okay.
If you are not a Satanist, or if you don't adhere to the satanic church, working for that corporation might be difficult for you because their rules and regulations and corporate culture will then reflect their religious beliefs. And you may not agree with some of the things that they think are okay. Yeah. The same thing, flip side, with Hobby Lobby. The president of Hobby Lobby, who is Steve Green, said, quote, "We believe that the principles that are taught scripturally are what we should operate our lives and naturally flows into the business." Okay, I understand that, but what if I don't believe in your scripture? Then I am subject to rules and regulations working for you that do not reflect my religious freedom because I have to adhere to your religious beliefs and structures that may go against my religious beliefs. And so what we are creating now is our corporations who are not only free to say whatever they want and free to give as much money to any political cause as they want, but now they are free to say we are this religious affiliation corporation and we will conduct ourselves accordingly. That, friends, is the beginning of the slippery slope that is the corporations are taking over the world.
Well, but here's the really scary part: is this is really the sort of logical evolution of what's going to happen once you give them personages. Once you let me just start again. Once you grant the personage status to a corporation, that means logically that you would have to grant them, in this country anyway, the freedom of religion, the freedom of expression, the freedom. Whoa, wait a minute! All of these rights that we're supposed to have as individuals. Well, if the corporation is yet another person, then those rights belong to them too, right?
What if the corporation wants to have a gender affiliation? What if the corporation wants to be a female corporation or a male corporation or a female Christian corporation or a male Islamic corporation?
Ah.
Think about this, folks. Now, I say that if corporations want to be human, let's make them human. Okay, fine. Humans live about 72 to 78 years. Corporations should die at about 78. That's good. Corporations like GM who murder 13 people with their products, those guys are going to prison, because I know if you or I or anyone else listening murdered 13 people, we wouldn't be listening. We'd be sitting in jail.
Yeah, right.
Corporations who are female, hey, you make 83 cents on the dollar because women make less than men, and we're not completely clear why, but that's how it is.
Uh-huh. Well, there you go. But, I mean, just right away, just removing all the rest, if we just think about the concept of criminal liability, well, an individual does have criminal liability for their actions. I don't know, that wouldn't be so bad, would it?
No, because GM knew that their ignition switch was the cause of the fires and cause of the brake failure and the power steering failure and some of the other components of the operational ability of the vehicle. They knew that it was faulty and they put it out anyway. So guess what? GM should go to prison. I don't know how you would do that. Take all the board of directors, the CEOs, everybody on top, and just put them all in a prison cell for how many ever years we would convict a regular person for 13 murders?
Oh, see, that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, how do you legally sanction a corporation, right?
Exactly.
They pay fines. That's all they do. So that's their answer to that one as well. We just pay a large fine.
Okay, well then human beings pay fines.
Here's the problem. If I murdered 13 people, I'm not going to pay a fine. Okay? Where is the equal application of justice? Where's the blind lady with the scales here?
Exactly. We're not thinking about this. We're just giving corporations, which is it's a legal fiction, and we're giving them personhood. And this the Satanic Temple. This is just one. They've already indicated that they're initiating a number of campaigns to assert their religious protection for women. A number of campaigns. So guess what? Every religion should then say, look, or every corporation should say, look, the CEO or the president is this religion. The corporation is now adhering to this religious belief system, regardless of what the employees believe. And they have to be part of this corporate culture that now reflects a religious belief, regardless of the employees. So who is hurting here? You and I. Corporations now can take people to court. They could refuse service based on their religious beliefs. They can infringe on more of your constitutional rights just by having freedom of religion.
Well, because after all, on the food chain, they're the much more important person, aren't they? And this is the big problem. And you know what? I don't blame the Satanist temple or the Church of Satan, as I think their website describes them as. You know what? Don't blame them. They are perfectly within their rights at this point to do so. If every other corporation, every other company can do this, why can't they as well?
That is the reason why the Hobby Lobby decision was so important. And this was glossed over by nearly everyone in all walks of media. But it is a development in our culture. You and I were talking earlier about gaming and social media. We are social creatures. There was a study that was done 2 years ago. I can't remember the university, but they said that when chatting first came out, there was a lot of misunderstanding, obviously, because we use tone. We look at each other with body language. Most of our communication is nonverbal, and that's 90% of it. And so when we would chat or text, we would misinterpret each other. Then we started using emoticons. Right. And so, if you were joking, you'd put a little winky face or a smiley face or a little face sticking his tongue out. Or if you were mad, you'd put a little mad face so that the person knew you were mad. Well, this study showed 2 years ago that humans have now adapted to chat conversations, and they are misinterpreting each other's emotional response to each other's chat less and less. We're adapting to the technology. That's not insignificant, because when we talk about things like transhumanism, we talk about moving into actually having machine parts in our body. But we don't think about the fact that we use this technology so much and it is so ingrained. I mean, I'm using it right now to talk to you. I would have never met you if it wasn't for this technology.
That's right.
But it is because of this technology that our brains are rewiring to accept the new reality that this technology provides for us, and that is very, very significant. In the future generations, including my children, which is the next generation, they will be fully integrated into technology. It won't be awkward like it was for you and I when we first started using texts or chatting, or those AOL chat rooms that were absolutely insane. Now people understand. They don't misinterpret each other. They don't just become reactionary. They actually have real conversations as if they were sitting in front of each other, and yet they're in a chat.
Right, because now that has become the new normal. And this is the thing, but it is still artificial, regardless of, and you know what else? Even with that buffer in between people, now what you have is the greater possibilities for manipulation, for the changing of the culture by the greater corporations again, because all they have to do is change the way that we communicate with each other. They change the system, we'll adapt to it, right? But that means that they can actually change the level and the texture of expression, essentially. And we're already seeing that by, people posting pictures of themselves, putting them out there to show something that's going on or whatever else. I mean, people even use pictures of themselves making faces in order to evoke, what it is that they're talking about. Like if they they're joking around, they'll show a picture of themselves, like holding their hand up to their face and, smiling. Stuff like that, right? But it's all artificial. And you're right, they are going to be more adaptive. I mean, we got used to the idea very quickly in our generation but there was a time when there wasn't cell phones very common, okay? Wireless communication was like a weird idea, really. The internet, again, something that we didn't see. Okay, fine. Computers themselves weren't even, like, the personal computer wasn't even a real big thing, and this stuff is accelerating. But at the end of the day, where is the natural interaction between people? I mean, there are, right now, as we speak, I guarantee you there are parents and children across this country that aren't even talking to each other. They're sitting there and instant messaging each other on whatever sort of device they're using at the moment, back and forth when they're in the same house. Now, when you and I were growing up, we yelled at each other from one room to the other. you know, I'm not saying that, and I don't mean necessarily that it was like a negative sort of aggressive yelling. It was just sort of just so you could be heard. You didn't pick up your cell phone and send a text to your dad, can I go outside? Or can I go somewhere else? Whatever. I don't think kids go outside anymore too much, but...
They don't, unfortunately.
But that's a whole other issue, right? I mean, depriving themselves the nutrients from the sun and everything else. And, well, at the same time, I almost don't blame them because I don't like going outside when I see the chemtrails over our heads anyway. But
that's true.
So it's all a mixed message. But at the end of the day, it's still an artificial buffer between people. Now, that leaves itself open for manipulation. That leaves itself open for... Why can't artificial intelligence interact with us about the same way? I mean, there is a whole huge can of worms here that's getting open nice and slow. But really, it happens very quickly. This whole thing is sort of accelerated again in our lifetime. We went from, the wired phone and, not everybody in the world had cable and there wasn't cell phones everywhere to where we're at now. I know that it's, probably nothing like the technologies the elites seem to have, but, kind of an amazing leap if you think about it.
It is. It's very impressive. I mean, I think back, I've got the small kids now, so I play with them, and I want to do the things I did, and there are no kids outside in the neighborhood, and the kids don't even want to play outside. We have all of this stuff in the backyard for them. We pulled out the pool this summer. We got all this jungle gym stuff for the kids. It just sits there. The spiders make webs in it. That the kids don't want to be outside. Then there's nothing for them, and it's dangerous for them in the sense that every other parent or every other person is thinking, oh my God, why are the kids playing outside? Is everything okay? And God forbid, one of the kids should be screaming for whatever reason the kids scream, and then the neighborhood starts freaking out and people start making phone calls to CPS that, oh my God, there's a kid screaming. It's amazing in 26 years how all of that is completely altered. But to open up the door to artificial intelligence, I wrote this article this week about U.S. veterans. I found this study that they did very fascinating. They claim that individuals who serve in the military have experienced more traumatic or adverse childhood events than the average child, including drug abuse, sexual abuse, violence in the home. And so people who would even go into military service are all people who are damaged, is basically what the study goes on to say. And
I'm sorry, where was that study from? Do you remember?
Yes, the study was from the researchers for the Center of Health Equity Research and Promotion, which is part of the Veterans Affairs Office in Pittsburgh under the Pittsburgh Healthcare System.
Oh, lovely. Okay.
Yes. The title of the study, it's linked up in my article. The article is on OccupyCorporatism.com. The study linked up is Disparities in Adverse Childhood Experiences Among Individuals with a History of Military Service. And so they showed in this study that an individual who would go into military service, including active duty service, veteran status, or training for reserves or National Guard, were twice as likely to report childhood experiences of being forced into a sexual act or being forced to have sex, or more likely to report adverse experiences with drugs and alcohol or any sort of abuse, which was tied to their severity of poor health outcomes later on. Now, this whole study opens up the door that even people who would go into the military are damaged, and during the military they become even more damaged, and when they come out they're even more damaged, they're completely worthless. So let's replace the active humans with robots, because the robots wouldn't have adverse effects to combat situations that were then exacerbated by their childhood adverse experience, the childhood adverse experiences that they talk about. This is a very sick way to segue into having artificial intelligence as soldiers instead of humans.
Well, after all, the drones won't care if they burn down a village.
Yes.
Yeah. So, listen, we'll give you something. Here we go again with the solution being even worse. I tell you, Suzanne, you're killing me with this. It's like everything you bring up is like, here's your solution. It's got the same problems but worse. This is like the I don't know, just the theme of the world we live in at this point. You want to complain about this? You think this is bad? Well, listen, we got a solution for you. It's a lot worse, but it's a solution. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. Facebook is conducting another surveillance experiment on all of its users. They are doing it for advertising purposes, of course. Yeah. But the Federal Trade Commission has been invoked by two gentlemen, one a legal officer for the European Consumer Organization and the executive director for the Center of Digital Democracy, in response to Facebook's announcement that they are going to be tracking their users' browser history for advertising purposes. Your browser history. Not just what you're doing on Facebook while you're in the Facebook sphere and navigating through all the posts and clicking on stuff and going to your groups and commenting on liking your friend's stuff and maybe deleting people and all that. Outside of that, your actual browsing history is now up for grabs. Why? Because Facebook puts in a little cookie A lot of websites do this, by the way. A lot of social media websites do this.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of news media websites do this. And just so you know, a couple of alternative news websites do this as well. It's a little tracking cookie. It downloads into your computer, and it tracks you from the time you leave the website where you obtain the cookie and follows you along, recording everything you do until you go back to the website where it downloaded the cookie. It downloads the information from the original cookie and then uploads a new one to you, and you don't even know that it's there.
Right, and this is all under the guise of being able to target the advertising to you, right?
Right, and they want to know where you are. They want to know what your gender is, your ethnicity, your primary language, where you've recently moved to, where your family is located, where you work. They want to know if you're a baby boomer. They want to know if you're a gamer. They want to know if you're a fan of a specific sport team. They want to know if you take cruises. They want to know if you use technological devices of any kind, what you prefer.
Yeah, well, Facebook in and of itself, I mean, look, I know you and I both use it because it's, a fairly decent networking tool, but the fact is that Facebook in general is probably one of the largest mass self-surveillance tools I've ever seen constructed.
It's quite shockingly brilliant, I have to say.
Because it's all voluntary. Yeah, it's voluntary. I mean, look, all I have to do, realistically, if I want to get information on somebody, is if I can get onto their Facebook stuff. I mean, people don't even realize, I think, half the stuff that's up there, or that's been put there. Plus, don't forget, when you start to interact with your friends, a whole other set of tones and algorithms can be set based on the individuals you associate with, the stuff that they happen to like. I mean, it's just... It's really, I'm astonished at exactly how brilliant it actually is, to be honest with you.
And it's not just Facebook. OkCupid, which is a dating site, they conducted a 3-year experiment on their users and their members. They deliberately matched people who were not compatible just to see what would happen, what kind of comments they would make. Yeah, they did for 3 years. For 3 years, they're touting these algorithms that, based on the questionnaire, they'll match you up with the perfect person. They did this on purpose to see what the comments would be after the dates, to see what they would say about each other after they got together. Now, Christian Rudder, who is the founder of OkCupid, not only defended his social experiment, but also the social experiment that Facebook just got caught conducting, where they were putting posts in there just to see what your emotional reaction would be and record it. And he was bragging, saying, OkCupid, Facebook, he said all websites experiment on their users. It's not just me. It's not just Facebook. We all do it. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, well, see, again, if the new normal is the new normal, then therefore it's normal, right?
So imagine a lot of people meet online now. A couple of years ago, it was a laughable thing, or you didn't want to admit to your family or your mother, okay, I met my fiancé online, I'm sorry, Mom. But now it's absolutely normal. People do it all the time. You pay for these services, you trust them to do this thing for you, to find somebody that you obviously couldn't do. Because, I don't know, Chuck, how did we meet people before OkCupid or Match.com or any of these stupid dating sites? We just went outside.
But there you go. You went somewhere, you went somewhere of interest, or just somewhere in general. I mean, people would meet each other in grocery stores or whatever else. I mean, you'd meet people in all different ways. Usually it was because it was a friend of somebody, or somebody your cousin knew, or God knows what else. But you see, here's the thing, though. That all came from a web of social interaction, right? So you traveled in a particular sphere of social interaction. But, hey, welcome to the 21st century, right? Welcome to it, because after all, you don't need to even bother with all of that anymore. You can create it while you just sit on your butt and type on a keyboard, or hey, if you don't want to sit in your house, while you're going from place to place and you're buying your McDonald's or whatever else it is you're doing, hey, you can just pull out your smartphone. You can do it that way. There's apps for it if you like, so that you don't even have to read.
Absolutely. And just to let you guys know, if anybody remembers Nielsen Media Research, the Nielsen ratings, when people actually watched cable, cable is dead, by the way. If you're still paying your bill, you just stop it. But right. Nielsen Media Research has gotten together with Facebook because Facebook is so good at tracking people, to track all of their mobile device users and find out what they're watching and when they're watching it and what device they're watching it on, and whether or not they're watching television shows or if they're just going to YouTube or if they have subscriptions at Hulu or any other place, or if they're just going to history.com and watching an old rerun of Ancient Aliens. They want to know what you're doing. And so Facebook is going to provide the Nielsen Media Research Corporation with all of this information so they can better their Nielsen ratings.
Well, Nielsen needs Facebook because Facebook has the database. I mean,
they do.
It's not really, you know what? It's not a big shocker when you say stuff like this. I'll tell you something funny though. You know, the Arbitron ratings still exist too, even though terrestrial radio is essentially dead as well.
That's amazing. That's like beating a dead horse. Let it die.
But I know for a fact they still exist because they just sent me something.
I love that. You know, technology isn't so great. Oh, by the way, this is totally off subject, but you just reminded me of this. I just had to buy car insurance. Okay. And I'm not going to tell you where I bought it, but I bought it online, and they called me right as I was making the purchase.
Right.
And they wanted to know if I had any questions. And so I started asking the gentleman questions. I noticed that this company had merged with another company, and I was asking him about that. And I let him know that I'm a journalist, and I'm just curious. And he said that was above his pay grade, and so I understood that. And then he said something very interesting. He said, well, this call is for documentation purposes. And I said, well, what do you mean? Because I'm also a trained paralegal. So my ears perked up. I said, really? Because I just agreed that this call would be recorded. Right. And I said, well, what kind of documentation? He said, well, you know, in case we get into a he said, she said battle, we have this call recorded, and it could be used in court. And I said, well, then I'm going to have to end this call because it's a violation of my Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. I have the right not to incriminate myself, and you're telling me that this call may be used to incriminate me later on if in fact it comes to a legal battle between you and I. And I'm not agreeing to that.
Which is absolutely well within your right to assert, because after all, you have the right, at least as the way things stand now, to not incriminate yourself. You have that Fifth Amendment privilege, absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. So the gentleman kind of scoffed at me, and I'm sure that I became the butt of many jokes in the office that afternoon. But it dawned on me that every time, you know, we've agreed that calls will be recorded for quality assurance. It never dawned on me until I spoke with this gentleman that these calls could be used in a court case. Let's say you stop paying your insurance bill for X or Y reason, and then all of a sudden they take you to court and they play this recording where you agreed to all of this stuff that you don't remember because it's been years and you didn't record the call, so you don't know what you said. Right. These corporations are really very sneaky, okay?
Well, you know what else they do, too, really quickly, because I've had experiences with this stuff, too, where I've cut off the call. And I'll tell you, they really quickly go through this, like, you know, this piece of text that I know they have in front of them, or maybe they've been doing it long enough that they have it memorized, where it's like, I want you to understand that you've just contracted with this company, and therefore you are liable for blah, 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 blah. And they run down this stuff really, really quickly. And meanwhile, all you're trying to do is finish your purchase, or to check on the status of an account or something like that. And they go through this whole spiel, which basically boils down to what this guy told you, which is that, hey, if it ever comes up in a court case, we can use it. That is exactly what it comes down to.
Exactly.
And I bet you a lot of people out there have had to deal with this, whether you've dealt with a bank, or you've dealt with, being overcharged for something, or you were even validating a coupon for something, or whatever else. I guarantee you there was this really quick little legal disclaimer to let you know that, and also to tell you that this call may be recorded or monitored for quality assurance. So,
and let me tell you a little legal thing. If you have creditors calling you, first of all, your debt has already been paid. The credit company bought the debt off of the guy that you owe the money to, so the debt has been paid. Second of all, you have no contract with the credit company. You have a contract with the person that you owed the money to, which was then paid off when he paid off your debt to sell it to or when the credit company paid off your debt to buy it from them. Right. So you have no contract with this third-party creditor. You do not ever have to speak to them, ever, for any reason. You can, if you want to, you can tell them, I never had a contract with you. My debt has been paid. You paid it. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Click. And that's perfectly legal. Credit companies, these collecting companies, they go, they try and take people to court. They try and get people to settle before they, as they're threatening to take you to court, because they know this. And they know, well, they're hoping that you don't know what I just told you. So next time your creditor or your collection company calls you, you can tell them, thank you for paying my debt. My debt's already been paid. I had no contractual agreement with you. Take my name, don't call here again, or I'll consider it harassment and file charges against you.
I in my past, I've actually paid some of these third-party people and everything else, because they usually offer you one of these settlements. This is how you know it's one of them, actually. They always come with a different letterhead. They explain who they are, and then they tell you, look, you owe X amount of dollars, but for a mere, 28%, or for a mere 40% of what it is you actually owed, because they bought it at a cut rate. In other words, whatever company you had contracted with to begin with, generally, has sold it off for less than what you supposedly owed, regardless of the interest or whatever else. And they package this stuff. They've usually packaged you together with a whole lot of other people and sold it off to this other third party. And that is exactly what happens. And I got to tell you, I never thought about it years ago when I had these kind of problems, when I had credit cards and stuff like that. Like I said, I haven't been awake, for all my life. But there was there is this element. I'm glad you bring this up, because I am very curious about this.
Having a legal background, when I went to become a paralegal and I studied, I was very shocked at some of the things that I learned, and this was one of them. And my husband, for a time, was working for a collection agency. And so he was learning all of the legal workings about collection agencies. And we got into this discussion, and he said, well, no, they paid off the debt. They're trying to get back their money from you. And I said, well, if I don't have a contract with you, then I don't owe you money. And if you paid off my debt, well, thank you very much, Good Samaritan. I'm free to go. Free on you for paying off my bad debt,
Oh, boy. And I don't know how the laws of anybody's state, actually go, but that does make a whole lot of sense to me.
And the good thing about law is there's primary sources of law and secondary sources of law. Primary sources are the laws within your state. Secondary sources are laws in other states. And you can always look up secondary sources of law or tell your attorney to do so. They have access to Westlaw or Lois Law. And they can bring up a case that happened in Maryland if you happen to live in Los Angeles. And if it's pertinent to your case, then, and I'm sure that there's lots of people who have enacted this before and probably gone to court, and the judges have to rule because you don't have a contract with this creditor unless you sit down and talk with them and start saying yes to things and agreeing to things. That's when you cross over the line, because then they can claim verbal contract and in lieu of a physical contract. So you have to be really careful. That's why I hung up the phone on this gentleman, buying the car insurance, because anything that I'd said up to that point could have been used against me. I didn't want to say anything more. It was done. And I did let him know, and it was recorded. And it in a way, it sort of makes me think, well, maybe these phone calls that I'm not sure about, that sometimes cross on my cell phone, maybe I shouldn't call them back on Skype and record the call myself. And it's unfortunate that we would even have to entertain that idea, that we now have to record our own phone calls for quality assurance just in case.
That's true, because
And you know what? And those of you with smartphones probably already know there's all kinds of apps and things where you record all your incoming and outgoing phone calls if you like, and you could actually keep a record for yourself. I don't know if you know what? I don't care. It is out there. It is one of those things I'm sure people are aware of, but it is kind of sad that we've gotten to this point where you better have documentation, electronic or otherwise, to back things up, because otherwise you might be sucked into some other contractual agreement by verbally, admitting to something or other during a phone conversation, right?
Well, yeah, but this is a life in a world where corporations run the show. Because everyday average people who don't pay attention to legalities or intricacies. I don't know if anyone went to the website of their local municipality and read the docket of any of the court cases that have gone through lately. Most of it's very boring, but if we all did, we would have more of an idea of how the law is being applied and how it should be applied as opposed to how it is being applied. Like in the state of Washington, we have our own constitution. And that states that, and there are only a handful of states that actually have their own constitution. But that means that not only do the corporations and the governments in the state of Washington have to adhere to the U.S. Constitution, but they also have to adhere to the Washington State Constitution. And we have corporations, especially with foreclosures. The banks are constantly going against the Deeds of Trust Act here in Washington State, which they have to adhere to. And if more homeowners would take the time to read the court cases that are going on now with regard to foreclosures, they would find that these cases are actually exposing how the banks are stealing the homes from the people. And we know that they do the little scam where, hey, don't pay your mortgage, we'll redo your paperwork for you and get you refinanced. Meanwhile, while you're not paying your mortgage, they're actually getting together your foreclosure paperwork and stringing you along until everything's stamped and dated and mailed off. And then at the last minute they say, oops, well, we filed your paperwork, but you were denied. And then the next day you get a notice on your door that you have 30 days to vacate the property.
Mm-hmm.
These little nuances are being exposed in these court cases. And for all of the technology that we have and access to the technology that we have, we also have a generational gap. And we've been talking about this off and on throughout the broadcast.
Right.
Where the baby boomers, they grew up completely without technology. It happened later in their life. My mother is a baby boomer, and she adapted to technology very well, but a lot of her friends just, poke with one finger and don't know anything. And ironically, it's usually the husbands that don't know how to work it, and the wives do know how to email, so I don't know what that is. I'm not going with gender bias or anything, but it seems to be that way.
Right.
But the Generation Xers, we played Nintendo as kids, and I remember when I was in high school when the big clunky cell phones came out, and like all of the wealthy girls. I went to a high school that was very wealthy. I was not very wealthy, but the other kids were. And so they had the big clunky cell phones walking around, and as technology grew, they had more and more awesome, cool little gadgets that they were carrying around, which I could not afford. But I remember when there was none of this stuff. It didn't exist. It wasn't even part of reality. And then all of a sudden it was thrust upon us.
Right.
And we haven't adapted our ability to understand the wonderful, incredible door that has been opened to us. And if we only used it in that way, applied it in that way, then we could learn anything that we want. And we could go through all of the bad stuff and the disinformation and go through the good information and make a conscious decision. But Generation Xers in their 30s and 40s and early 50s were just kind of trying to get through it and realizing that this technology is moving faster than our brains are moving. And the fortunate or unfortunate part is our children adapt extremely. My daughter is 3.5 years old, and my son, the first time he went and surfed the web, my husband and I never taught him to do this. He did this by watching us. And one day he got in front of the computer and he put in a keyword into Google, and just the other day, my son and I were arguing, and he said, but it's Google said this, and I said, I don't care what Google says. And I realized I just referred to Google as an entity.
Yeah, and you know what? I've told the story on this show before that when I first got a YouTube channel, I was having trouble putting up my videos, and I think it was my then 9-year-old daughter, or actually, no, wait, excuse me, I think she was 7. She helped me to put up my YouTube videos. So, you know, and they are already sort of, prepared to do this stuff. Because they've been introduced to it at an earlier age, and this does create a difference. And you're right, we're watching it accelerate and trying to catch up. This is not the same thing that obviously our parents are doing, but it is a different world, and it is a double-edged sword. Because as you mentioned, pretty much all of the collective knowledge of humanity could be accessed in one way or another, on the internet. But at the same time, a lot of garbage can be too, And what we have to do is be, vigilant when it comes to our own, cognitive reasoning, when it comes to our own ability to sift, our own personal sifters, if you will, internally. And this is definitely the key here. And we're running low on time. And I want to make sure that we point everybody to the articles, because all the articles that you referenced are all at OccupyCorporatism.com. And, unless there's anything else that you want to throw in here toward the end, I'll tell you, it's always an interesting conversation with you, Suzanne, whether I've had it with you on the air or off the air. Definitely, we go in a lot of different directions. And I'm sorry, I'm a little bit of a scatterbrain, so I don't always stay focused with, where I start, but I think it's all relevant, and one of these days we are going to have that on-air chat about mind control, too, because I didn't forget.
Oh, we should.
I did not forget about it, and if you notice, I don't utilize any of those techniques, but we do know that there are those out there that do, huh?
We do. And just the other day I was watching this talk by this gentleman discussing Bitcoin and the applications of Bitcoin in the future, what the cryptocurrency actually represents as far as the evolution of currency. And he was using neurolinguistic programming. He was a great storyteller. And he had this demeanor of a bumbling idiot. And I know that this guy is very, very smart because of his credentials. He couldn't possibly have achieved all of this academic status without being intelligent. However, he was playing the bumbling idiot, and my husband and I were laughing because it's so brilliant that this guy made himself seem kind of stupid and said a lot and stumbled on his words, but it was key because he would bring his audience out from a hypnosis by telling stories and then jar them. And he had an anchor. He kept grabbing the back of his chair. Every time he said something important that he wanted people to remember, he would grab the back of his chair and aggressively grab it. And then he would go off on his storytelling, and then he'd come back to the chair and say this poignant thing, and then he'd go back to his storytelling. And people don't realize that the whole entire talk, the 2-hour talk that he did, was absolute programming, absolute 100% programming.
Yeah, and they used to call that the false sort of aloof concept, in psychology, and that's exactly what you do. Is you sort of lure people in by lowering, your intimidation factor. Like, it's more intimidating to deal with somebody who's seriously intelligent, who knows a lot more than you. It kind of is oppressive to the audience, but when you remove that by creating, like the sort of clowning, bumbling, whatever it is technique you want to try and utilize there. It causes people to relax a bit and to be more susceptible to the message, right? So
yeah, it's like the laugh track. It makes it okay for you to laugh at the joke that's happening on the sitcom because you hear people laughing.
Well, exactly. It's a whole lot less disturbing. No matter what it is, it's a whole lot less disturbing because, after all, other people are laughing, even though, it's a recording of people that have probably been dead for 20 years. It's okay. Yeah, absolutely. That's
I would love to have that conversation.
We're gonna do that, but I'm telling you, I think we'll need the full 2 hours to just go over it, because we're gonna need to set up those precedents. We're gonna need to set up the history of it a bit, and
Yes.
And really discuss it, and then take people into the current. Thank you guys for listening. What matters worldwide?
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
See, but I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, that guy, how can that be possible? The brain, you know, days and the fondle slab of choice. I don't know what computers doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from, as long as it's real. It doesn't. It's hard to get real information because seriously.